Cotton, I've got good news and bad news.
Oh gosh, what is it?
Well, there's an arch-tempered Rey Dau.
What's the good news then?
That was the good news. The bad news is that 3 innocent villages are dead. But I thought you might get some enjoyment out of the challenge. Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, yesterday we had the release of a brand new event quest featuring our first arch-tempered quest in Monster Hunter Wilds, which is for arch-tempered Rey Dau. This opens up a lot of possibilities for the future. It's the first arch-tempered monster in the series that isn't an Elder Dragon. It creates some expectations for the future of Wilds as well, potentially for the other Apexes to follow suit and get arch-tempered versions, and honestly it's really exciting for the future as far as I'm concerned personally. But before we start thinking about stuff like that, let's focus on the present. Some players are finding this fight easier than they expected it to be, others are getting their butt kicked back and forth, but it is undeniably a much more challenging fight than the base version of Rey Dau, and I'd argue it is pretty on par with the other hardest fights that we have in the game now as well, being even harder than any other monster in the game in some ways, and a little bit easier than the other hardest monsters in others. But as with most monsters, there are always ways to make all of that easier for yourself, and there's some extra hidden goodies as well that you can get from this quest that you probably didn't expect as well, especially given that it's only available as a quest for a limited time period. That said, we will start off with the most unexpected additions to the game from this quest being added, and then we'll move into the proper details of his arch-tempered changes and a full list of tips and advice on how to make the fight easier for yourself and your allies. Starting off then, once you have defeated arch-tempered Rey Dau, you can get Rey Dau Gamma tickets. I've had even up to 3 of these drop from a single quest without any bonus rewards from gear or food skills, anything like that, just pure regular drops. And the obvious thing that you can do with these is craft the new player armor, which we've talked about quite a bit in depth. We had a whole video talking about this armor earlier, but there are 3 other things you can craft with these tickets as well. First, there is a palico armor set, the Rey Dau Gamma palico set. A lot of players don't think to check these, especially for event quests, but the palico armor does exist, and it's actually notably better than normal palico Rey Dau equipment, most importantly being that the weapon is quite good for a thunder element palico weapon if you're bringing your palico against anything that is weak against thunder, say duna, say perhaps even in the future, perhaps an arch-tempered duna. Then we have 2 talisman upgrades, which is a pretty well hidden one, as most people wouldn't think to check the talisman upgrade menu to begin with, but then even if you do, you would have to then have the specific talismans already at their old maximum level when you look to even notice. And the 2 specific talismans are the defense charm, which now goes up to rank 5 with Rey Dau Gamma tickets, as opposed to being capped at 4 ranks of the skill, which it used to be before this. And then the power charm, which is the latent power skill, the one that's associated with Rey Dau, and this now goes to 3 ranks, being the first 3-slot decoration armor skill that has 3 ranks available on a talisman. So if you like latent power as a skill, this talisman is now really quite good. Is it good enough to be better than talismans like 3 levels of Counter-Strike, or 2 levels of Weakness Exploit, or 2 Agitator? That's dependent on your setup, your playstyle, your weapon, but it is at least now a consideration due to this change. The thing that I find unusual about this is that these are permanent upgrades to charms that are already in the game, but can only have this upgrade applied with a ticket that will only be available when the event quest is active. The armor set is one thing because it only exists if you have the tickets to begin with, you won't even see it otherwise, but the fact that regular charms now have upgrades that require Gamma tickets definitely could cause a little bit of awkwardness for players. That said, the most exciting part of this in my mind is that it will likely extend to arch-tempered versions of other Apexes that I assume will happen in the future. And while Rey Dau is associated with latent power, which is good but not fantastic as a skill, this could get quite crazy when we get something like arch-tempered Jin dahaad, perhaps, whose main associated skill is Agitator, which is a very strong skill, and if that gets a 3rd rank on the charm before master rank, it's gonna be pretty dang strong. All that said, let's move on now to the fight itself, starting with the changes going into arch-tempered Rey Dau compared to his other normal fight. First up and most apparent, he will start the fight in his powered up state. Normally he can do this when he is enraged and is part of the sort of ebb and flow of the fight, where when he's not enraged he won't generally have this, and when he is enraged he can have it for short periods of time. But for arch-tempered Rey Dau, he starts off like this, meaning that he has access to his full move set, including his his deadliest attacks, like the big railgun, even from the very first moment that you begin the quest against him. As well, while he's in this mode for Arch-Tempered, the vast majority of his attacks will have aftershocks attached to them. He will do a wing slam, and then a moment after, electricity will pop on the ground where his wing hit. This is a representation of his fulgurite-covered body, almost like he is shaving off bits of the charged fulgurite as he slams, which then pop of their own accord after the fact. This also applies to his tail attacks, as his tail is covered in it too, and pretty much any actual lightning elemental attacks that he does will also have these aftershocks. This effect will stop happening for a bit if you can kick him out of his powered up state. You can do this by getting wound pops and part breaks on his wings and tail specifically. You'll be able to see a visual representation as you are slowly doing this. After the pop, you will have a bit less fulgurite on that body part. Do that a few times and he will lose his fulgurite power up completely, and he won't be able to get it back for a bit, essentially the next time that he is enraged. And when you get him powered down like this, he loses all of his aftershocks from his attacks. He can still do pretty much the rest of the majority of his moveset, but the aftershocks being removed makes it much easier during this period of time. So it's a way to remove a lot of difficulty for a couple of minutes of hunting and get you a lot more opportunity to deal damage. Aside from that, he also has new moves. Specifically, I believe, to my knowledge, he only has one properly new move, and everything else is just funky combo variations or timing switch-ups using his previous attacks. The new move proper is one that I like to call Railgun Uppies. He looks down at the ground under him, charges up his face, fires a railgun shot straight down at the sand underneath where his head was, and this sends him directly up into the air, like a rocket jump, as well with quick access to then following up with any of his flying attacks. The simple way to dodge the initial attack here is just to recognize the animation. It's very noticeable when he's charging it up, and then give yourself a couple of dodges away any direction except for forwards, really, because if you collide with his body, you will lose roll distance and probably get hit. If you want to iframe roll this attack, or if you want to perfect guard it instead, use sound cues. Sound cues are so good for Rey Dau. His sound effects are incredibly distinct in every single attack he does. He has a very specific noise that tells you when he is charging up a lightning shot. He has a different specific noise when he is just about to fire the lightning shot. The sound will change, and then when it actually releases, it is of course a very distinct noise as well. So if visual cues aren't doing it for you, if that's not enough to help you avoid the attacks, turn up your sound, pay more attention to it. From this attack, when he goes into the air, most of the time he will follow this with two very quick, small railgun shots, and these can be avoided by just walking sideways. They have very little radius on them. He can also then, though, follow it up with his big main aerial railgun attack quite quickly, or he can follow it up with the big flipping aerial wing slam. And of course, he can string multiple of those together in a combo as well, which is the main other new thing with how he fights in his Arch-Tempered version, is just the way that he combos his attacks. The closest thing to another proper new move that I've seen is for his wing drag combo when he's on the ground, where for normal Rey Dau, he will slowly drag one wing through the ground towards you, then slap it with the other wing, going one into the other, and then that's the end of the combo. With Arch-Tempered Rey Dau, he almost always does more than two wing drags when he chooses this attack. Specifically, he will either double up and do two drags with each wing, so right wing, left wing, or alternatively, he will do three wing drags, alternating back and forth, and then cancel the fourth one into the aerial flip wing slam as the finisher, which is quite nasty, especially if he goes off of your screen while doing it. My best advice for these is to use diagonal dodges perpendicular to the wing that is striking, using the hunter camera for directional reference of the words that I'm using here. If he is using his wing drag from the left side of your screen, you want to dodge either forwards and right or backwards and left, and you would do the opposite for wing drags from the right side, and be wary of the aftershocks that follow these too, especially for weapons that have parry mechanics or guard counters that can be interrupted. These are dangerous attacks to do that with, and you should just try to avoid the aftershocks purposefully. Aside from that then, for the most part, in his moveset, all I really saw was faster recovery animations, meaning he can go from one attack or combo into the next one much quicker, with less downtime in between. He can also combo for longer, just in general, before taking breaks, so it will look like he has new combos, but this is just him not stopping between multiple different unconnected attacks. And then outside of moveset, the more obvious changes are things like significantly increased damage, of course, notably increased health, and the more specific one here that makes him harder for wilds combat specifically, which is that it is much harder to generate wounds on him than most other monsters in the game. So if you are a hunter that is using their free flinches on every monster from the wound pops to make your hunts easier, and that's why you find the game easily, you will have to deal without those happening as often on Arch-Tempered Rey Dau. With all all that covered, then you now know what's that different and how to deal with the new and different things within Arch-Tempered Rey Dau. So let's go over some much more general tips for fighting him and just how to make it easier. First things first, for this quest he starts in his nest zone, which is absolutely covered head to toe in fulgurite. What this does is amplify the range of any lightning attacks that he does, which includes the aftershocks that follow his physical wing and tail moves too. This means he is just much harder to fight in that zone than any other zone on the entire map, and this is the place that you are most likely to encounter the most difficult moments. Obviously, if you want quick hunts, you won't follow the suggestion I have here, but if your goal is safe and consistent victories, avoiding carts, avoiding fainting rather than efficient fast hunting, one consideration is, well, waiting until he just leaves the zone. He starts in zone 17, and if you fight him there, you will be fighting him there for a good while before he chooses to leave. But if you start the quest and do not engage him in combat, he will move on to zone 16 right around the 3-minute marker on the quest timer. Generally speaking, you can avoid having him go back to his nest after that until you have him go skull mode, meaning like when he is nearly dead. On which note, when he is skull, he will of course go back to his nest, which again is the danger zone for this quest. You may well be aware by this point that you cannot use a shock trap on Rey Dau, he'll just absorb it essentially because it's electricity, but you can use pitfall traps against him, and Arch-Tempered or not, you can capture Arch-Tempered Rey Dau. So if, whether you want easier hunts, safer hunts, or even just quicker hunts as well, literally any of the above for this one, bring pitfall traps and trank bombs and just capture him as soon as he's low enough health, because you can, and it makes the quest more consistent. Aside from that, Rey Dau is a flying monster. An Arch-Tempered Rey, having longer combos, spends a lot more time up in the sky even compared to regular Rey Dau, which means that you want to bring flash pods with you, and ideally the means to craft more flash pods during the hunt as well. If you use these when he is flying, he will fall out of the air and you will get a free knockdown. You can even do this while unsheathed. This isn't just because I'm using sword and shield, any weapon can use these while you are unsheathed, though you can only do this a few times a hunt before he starts to become a little bit more resistant. So bring these with you, use them during the hunt, but pick and choose your moments purposefully. Maybe save them for while your mantle is available specifically, so you can have maximum buff overlaps with this knockdown, or if you're more worried about safety, if you're worried about dying, keep them on and equipped, but only actually use them to prevent things like a bad railgun attack overlap, as the big aerial railgun attack is his nastiest highest damage move, but also has a super long windup that you can flash him out of pretty easily if you notice it. Another thing that you will want to take advantage of with a purposeful mindset is ghost wounds. These are the sort of false wounds where if you are in focus mode, after some major attacks, you will see a monster light up an entire part of their body as if the whole thing is a wound, even though there's no actual wound there. If you do a focus strike on that body part during that moment while it's glowing, it'll work as if there is a wound there. You will do your full proper focus attack, and usually depending on the monster, they will have some super major flinch, or maybe you might even get a knockdown against them to reward you for noticing this specific part of their moveset. For Rey Dau, this is after any major railgun attack move, any of the bigger attacks where he clumps his horns up onto his face to fire out lightning, and then afterwards he will sit there yelling at you for a moment. And this is how you can recognize when the moment's happening even when you're not in focus mode. During this, while his face is glowing, if you use your focus strike against his head, you'll get a big long flinch and some free damage, but when you do this successfully, the ghost wound mechanic won't be able to show up again for another few minutes. It has some sort of internal cooldown or a timer in between how often you can do this, but it is still very relevant and will get you some extra damage and extra opportunities for damage too, especially when hunting in a group. Other than that, while on the quest at least, another solution is to try and involve the other monsters that are on the map. Rey Dau is stronger than any of the other ones on the map by a massive amount, of course, and he will do thousands of damage to them even in one attack. But if you are lucky, they might manage to get 1,000 or so damage into Rey Dau before they end up running away. And importantly, while Rey Dau is attacking another monster while they are fighting each other, he's not looking at you, which means that you can be looking at him with your weapons without any actual danger to yourself. The last things then are just a couple of important preparation and pre-hunt notes really, which is that, of course, every single one of his most threatening attacks is a thunder element attack, which means that thunder resistance as a stat is really good for this hunt for boosting your survival. If you have low thunder resistance, you will have a rough time. You will take a lot of damage. If you have high thunder resistance, the damage you take will be much lower in general, so get yourself a bit of thunder resistance wherever you can fit it into your set without losing too much other stuff when going into Arch-Tempered Rey Dau. If you hit specifically 20 thunder resistance, then you will stop getting Thunder Blight, which in itself will save you from being carded a lot of the time because it'll mean that you get stunned less often too. The reverse of that is that Rey Dau is weak to the ice element, so if you are trying to decide which element to bring against him, bring ice. That doesn't necessarily mean that you should build fully around element he isn't that weak to ice, but if, for example, you are just going to bring an Artian weapon anyways, an ice Artian weapon will do more overall damage than any other element Artian weapon will. Blast weapons as a status option are generally good against him too, there's no problem with that, but it is worth noting that he as a monster is resistant to paralysis compared to most other monsters, and as paralysis is actually very commonly used right now in WoW's endgame, that is worth pointing out here too, that maybe even if you have a paralysis build, you might not want to bring paralysis to him specifically. As well, there is the Blindsider skill, which is a level 1 decoration that increases flash effectiveness. It doesn't say what this means specifically, but especially for a quest like this, you may be wondering if that is relevant, and the answer is honestly not really, no. But you can use it if you want. It doesn't actually increase the amount of flashes that you can do before effectiveness starts to drop off. It doesn't reduce monster flash resistance or anything like that. It instead seems to only increase the range of the flash pot effect. So if you want longer range flashes, sure, you can use it, but that's what the skill is for. That just about does it for today then, everyone. Everything you need to know about Arch-Tempered Rey Dau, the special things that he unlocks that not every player will think to check, all the things that I'm aware of him getting, actually going into his Arch-Tempered version, and then any and all of the tips that I have to try and make him easier for anyone who is finding it to be a bit of a challenge. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and if you noticed anything else that has changed from regular Rey Dau, or if you have other tips, feel free to put them in the comments down below and share with your fellow hunters. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.